So, good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. It means a lot that you're here today. I thank you for that. I know that you are all busy people scurrying about, trying to get your kids, your grandkids, whoever you're dragging around in your car to this, that thing, and that thing, because I know I deal with you guys on a day by day basis in my office. But thank you for making the time. It means a lot to me. If you like what you hear, pass it on to your friends, your family. We're building a podcast, building an audience out there. And I do that not because of me, but because of the wonderful people that I bring to you on a weekly basis. And today it's a pleasure to welcome to my podcast, Nina Shapiro. Dr. Shapiro, welcome to the Hamilton Review.
It is great to be back here. The last time I was here, we were both sequestered in some sort of very early dark days of the pandemic.
Stages
so it's great to be here in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for making the time to be here. So let me tell you who Dr. Nina Shapiro is. She has been taking care of children for nearly 25 years. She is now a Professor Emerita at UCLA in the Division of Pediatric Ear, Nose, and Throat at Mattel Children's Hospital. She is now a pediatric ENT at the Westside Head and Neck office. She has written other books. She has edited several books, including Take a Deep Breath, Clear the Air for Health for Your Children, 50 Studies Every Pediatrician Should Know, and Hype, A Doctor's Guide to Medical Myths, Exaggerated Claims, and Bad Advice, How to Tell What's Real and What's Not Real. And that, by the way, that book was a Publisher's Weekly Best Book of 2018. Amazing. And she's also written for the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, CNN. She's been on CNN and NPR. Nina Shapiro is a superstar, basically, in a word. And so, Nina, it's really an honor to have you today on my podcast.
Thanks.
So today we're going to be talking about this book right here, which is called her latest book, The Ultimate Kid's Guide to Being Super Healthy, and what you need to know about nutrition, exercise, sleep, hygiene, stress, screen time, and more. Nina, we're going to talk about your book in a second, but before we get into that book, a couple things. Number one, tell us about yourself. Tell us about who you are, where you grew up, a little bit about your background, what kind of caused you to become a doc, and in particular, a pediatric ENT doc.
Wow. Well, I'm from the East Coast. I'm a New Yorker, born and bred and at heart, and I still have family in New York. And I decided to try California for a year. And that was many, many years ago, back in 1996, as many people do. They come out west to Southern California. That's where I did my pediatric ENT fellowship after my entire life in the Northeast, assuming that I'd head back to the Northeast as why wouldn't I? Until it was February in Southern California. And I decided to look for a job. And lo and behold, there was the perfect job for me up at UCLA. They were looking for a pediatric otolaryngologist, ear, nose, and throat doctor. They had none at the time. And so I was coming in to be their pediatric otolaryngologist. So it was a perfect opportunity, a great growing dynamic department. It was Mattel was just sort of becoming Mattel back then. And it was wonderful. It was terrifying and wonderful at the same time to sort of jump in right out of training as, really their sub specialist, getting referrals from all over the city, all over the country, out of the country. So it was very challenging. Some of the most challenging years of my career were my early years there. It grew and it was a wonderful experience. And then after just around 25 years, it was time for a change. The place has changed. I've changed. I was looking for different things. And I really wanted to find a group that was right for me, and I did. And that's this new group. It's actually not a new group. The group itself has been around also for about 20 years and growing. There are now 7 of us. And I am their pediatric ear, nose, and throat specialist. It's been wonderful. I've been there just over a year, and it's been a really different and enjoyable experience. I get to spend much more time with my families, with my patients. I get to know them a little bit more. There's less of that pressure and rush that we have in a large academic center.
Yeah.
So it's been terrific.
So, listen, I knew you from in both
Yeah.
locations, and of course, when you came in 1996 to UCLA, I think Ed McKay
Oh
was there.
yes,
And
definitely.
he
Yeah.
was one of the, I think he was the head of the department when I finished up. So I finished
Right.
up at UCLA, and I think you came on my heels on that one. And you were the only one there. That shocks me. I guess I didn't realize that there was
Right.
no pediatric ENT docs there
Right.
over there,
Right.
which is amazing. And then, so 25 years. So you went from a very academic world, and
Yes.
UCLA is really, I can imagine the kind of pressure and also the referrals you were getting from all over Southern California, because UCLA is a major referral center.
Right.
And so I'm sure you were getting very challenging cases that
Yes.
other ENTs either couldn't do or did not want to do, and they ended up at your doorstep.
Right.
So those were interesting years for you.
It was. I mean, we talk about in surgery, we call it the tile wall effect, meaning that, when you're a junior surgeon
Yeah.
in training, you look back and you see your attending or your fellow or somebody to sort of guide you.
Yep.
But when you're the one, you look back and you see the tile wall of the operating room. We call it the tile wall effect, which is a very, very common feeling that
Yeah.
anyone new in practice experiences. But I had many tile wall experiences
Moments.
early on, and you learn and you grow and you take care of kids and you're innovative, and it was a great
Yeah.
way to grow.
I mean, fortunately, we live in Los Angeles. You're in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And if you don't really know what you're going to do, you can always call people who are across town.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And it's very funny. I'd never heard that term tile wall, but it is. I oftentimes think, when I'm in my office and I'm seeing cases that I kind of go, well, I'm not really sure what this is. I wish that I had that pantheon of doctors
Right.
standing behind me, the ENT people like you. Certainly I refer a lot of people to you, but the dermatologist, the cardiologist,
Right.
the gastroenterologist, the hematologist, the oncologist, all these different people who we live with
Right.
at UCLA, and we can kind of grab them in the hallway as we walk by and say, by the way, what do you think about this?
Mhm.
They're not there anymore. And obviously we can refer them, but I long for that, especially when to be honest with you, when I'm in the field, when I do my medical mission work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I really want them there. I
Right.
would really love to
Right.
really know what I'm really dealing with sometimes. So you made the change,
I
and
did.
you're happy.
Very happy. And I think my patients are happy.
Yeah.
I hope my patients are happy because it's just a lot easier, the access. It's just a different environment to be in a, smaller group
Sure.
where they don't have to navigate a system.
Yeah.
So I think that's been
Yeah.
nice.
No, I think that private practice and there's a place for the major institutions. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
but I do think that private practice does put a little more personal touch
Absolutely.
to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you do get to know your patients really, really well. I mean, I certainly, over the time I've been in practice, I know, patients, they invite me to parties. I get to go to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and birthdays and all
Right.
sorts of stuff, like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the joy of being in the community,
Right.
which I think it kind of lends itself to, I think, who I am for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about a lot about your book. Again, the name of the book is The Ultimate Guide to Being Super Healthy, Kids Guide to Being Super Healthy. You wrote this book. This book is written for kids.
Right.
And I'm curious, first of all, why you wrote it. And clearly you were motivated. So what was the essence of your motivation?
So as you know, we spend our days talking to children, and that's really the most fun
Sure.
about what we do.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love is when kids have questions, and they have great questions, and oftentimes they stump me, and more often they just surprise me with how interested and inquisitive and they keep going with their questions. So sometimes it's not just a question and an answer.
Yeah.
A question leads to an answer leads to another question, which I really love. So I really wanted to share that voice with children.
Yeah.
one of the sort of aha, people talk about, well, what was that aha moment of I have to write this book? So it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I think I should write a book.
Right.
And it's another thing to say, I have to write this book. I was
And actually
watching
actually
and
do it.
actually get it done, which is
right.
another level. So I was watching Fed Up. I don't know if you remember that movie.
I know the movie.
It's I
Yeah.
can't remember what year it originally came out, but it was a movie about health and a little bit about diet and exercise and nutrition for children
Yes.
and adults as well. And some of the explainers during that movie were on such a basic level that I thought, this is great. This is really explaining it. It wasn't dumbing it down to
Yeah.
people. It was really just explaining it in a way that here's why this happens to your body. Here's what digestion does.
Yep.
Here's what nutrition does. Here's what exercise does. And at that moment, I said, this can be explained to a 9-year-old
Sure.
or a 6-year-old or
Yeah.
an 11-year-old. So let's write this down and let's make it fun. And let's not put any value judgment on this is bad for you, this is good for you.
Yeah.
Let's take all of that out and just explain this is what happens.
Yep.
And from working, I feel like kids respond well to that. They don't respond well to fear or worry or anything like that, or building things up in a negative way. But just if you put things in a more matter-of-fact way,
Yeah.
this is what it is.
Yeah, you tell
They
it
love
to
it.
you tell it to them straight, and you don't
Yeah.
have to be pedantic
Right.
and threatening or hold. I mean, I certainly with teenagers I do that a little bit.
It depends.
So, yeah, sometimes I do kind of
scare them.
throw the wrath of God
Yeah,
at them, but
right.
but usually for most kids, and this book is not written for teenagers; it's actually written for
Younger elementary.
kids.
Yeah.
And I'm friends. I just want you to know that I have read large parts of this book, and it's very, very well written. It's written. I have to tell you, I'm learning some things too. I shouldn't.
That's part of the goal of the book.
Yeah,
is for the adults to learn something too.
Yeah, I
sneak some new information in, or maybe not just a little
well,
bit.
you know what? It's the way you put it too. I think it is. I go, oh yeah, that's right.
Right.
But I think that the way you write it is so clear and so sweet. Now, let me just say this. This is out of your wheelhouse. You're a pediatric ENT doctor.
Right.
Okay. So, but you're talking about all sorts of things. You're talking about nutrition. You're talking about sleep. You're talking about other, immune issues and, hygiene and things like that. This is not exactly what I would call ENT
Right.
stuff. So you obviously, you're a doctor and you did your pediatric training? Was it pediatric? Or
ENT training in Boston. Yeah.
Okay, but your internship you did where?
At Beth Israel in Boston.
Okay.
General surgery.
In general surgery.
So we do general surgery, then ENT
Okay.
residency, and then pediatric ENT fellowship.
Okay, so you didn't do
Right.
pediatric per se,
Nope.
but you had to reach back and you had
Yes.
to kind of sit down and
Yes.
kind of think about how am I going to present these
Right.
ideas?
Right.
Because her book, by the way, is full scope. I mean, it really does. Let me just read you the titles of her chapters, and they're sweet. The first one is why can't we have cookies for dinner? Obviously about nutrition. What's so good about exercise? About muscles and bones, and why exercise is important. Why we can't stay up late. Why do I have to take medicine? Why am I going to get a shot? All these different things that you talk about in this book are not necessarily ENT per se. So tell us about that.
I love that. That's one of the joys of writing, in my experience. Hype, which was for adults, young adults up until any
Sure.
age, is not an ENT book either. It's really,
Sure.
it's about medical myths and misinformation and, explaining media exposure, all of that for adults. And, the expression, write what you know, I disagree with that. I think it's write what you can know.
Yeah.
And, we are educated and are always being educated. And I
Yep.
feel like we can learn as we write and learn how to explain it. So I don't think most doctors really know how toothpaste works. And I talk about how toothpaste works. It's not really a medical mystery or something
Right.
that, we
Yeah.
I don't remember spending a lot of time in medical school learning about toothpaste
It's very funny.
or soap even for that matter.
I don't remember that lecture.
I missed it.
Yeah. And that's funny because there are,
Right.
when kids, that would be a question that a child would ask you.
Right.
Why do we need toothpaste? Why does it work?
Why do we need toothpaste? Why do we need to
Yeah.
brush our teeth every day? Why do we need to wash our hands? Why do we need to use soap?
Yep.
All of these things that kids don't want to do,
Yeah.
or if they do, they think it's just because they have to. But once they understand what to understand the concept of pH is tricky
Sure.
for most adults and most children.
Yeah.
But to understand why whether you want to call them sugar bugs or bacteria or anything that's going to make your teeth dirty or have cavities, that they can understand,
Totally.
and what is in the toothpaste that helps knock that out.
Yep.
You can explain it on a deeper scientific level. I go a little bit deeper in the book, but not too deep, really literally scratching the surface about how toothpaste works. And then what I like to do for each chapter is give the kids a little bit of an activity
That's
to
right.
try. So,
That's right.
I give them a little recipe to make toothpaste, which, full disclosure, tastes terrible in the recipe, but just to see that it's similar to what, the name brand toothpaste is.
Yeah.
It's mostly baking soda.
Which is very cool. And by the way, yeah, she does have a little work areas in each chapter here, or actually, I think after the book. So is excellent, and also a very good glossary too. I do agree with you. I don't think you necessarily only have to, listen. Part of what we do as doctors is hopefully we're learning all through our career. I don't know any doctors in my life who ended up not reading any more medicine the day they graduated from medical school.
Right.
If they didn't, then
That's a problem.
that's a problem.
Right.
Okay, right. And I think that we're all, with the restrictions we have on CME requirements and what have you, we're always learning. But I agree with you. There are things that I learn. I kind of go, wow, that's interesting. I did not know about that. And you dig deeper.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously this is written at a relatively elementary level, but
Right.
still you bring out some really, really cool
Right.
things. You have garnered a pretty prestigious award called the Nautilus Book Award. This book won it. Tell us about the Nautilus Book
thank
Award.
you. Right.
Because I don't know about this.
Right. Thank you. It's an award that I looked into, and actually my publisher recommended that I apply
Yeah.
for this award. And what I like about the Nautilus Book Awards in general is they have different areas of subjects. So it gets really specific as far as
Sure.
the award that you can apply for, which is not the case for most larger book awards. Certainly there'll be children's will be one section.
Right.
But for Nautilus, they'll have children's, nonfiction, middle grade. So it's a much smaller area.
Right.
But the nice thing about that is that when they present the awards, that there are several people that win the award within your category. It's nice to be part of a group
Sure.
that's specific to an area. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank
I
you.
mean, to win an award of any
Yeah,
book
thank
that
you.
you write
Yeah.
means that's a kind of a pat on the back that you're doing the right thing.
Thanks.
Your overall, how is this book? I know you've sold several thousand copies of this book. How is it going on? How were people receiving it out there?
It's been really positively received. It came out in the sort of second year or after the first year of the pandemic, so there was very little in-person exposure at that time, which was fine. As we know, so many things are now online anyway.
Yep.
It's still selling actually pretty regularly, which is nice to see, mostly on Amazon.
Sure.
But it's still available in bookstores. We have it available in my office because a lot of the kids that I see are interested. So it's nice. It's pretty evergreen. I think,
Yeah.
I do talk about screen time, which is, of course, going to be different 5, 10, 15 years from now. But most of the topics are pretty stable, which is one of the reasons why, even though it came out in late 2021,
Yeah.
it's still relevant and will be so.
No, I
for the
think that
years.
this book has got a long longevity to it.
Thanks.
It's not it is not necessarily it's really timeless in so many ways. I do want to, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about specifically about some of your chapters. There are a couple of things that I have become much more mindful of as the years pass by. One of them is sleep. And
Mhm.
I talk about sleep a lot in my office now. And I have to say, this has been a relatively newer thing for me.
Right.
Um, I think that to a degree, we kind of tailor our medical advice based, I hate to say it, but on a lot of things that are happening to us personally.
Right.
Sleep was something that I never really thought about that much. I mean, I kind of
Mhm.
like, I need sleep. Yeah, I need sleep. Or, am I tired? I'll go to bed. But I never really realized the importance of sleep in terms of what is going on in your brain. And I think as doctors, and you can either agree or disagree, during our training, we are totally sleep deprived. And I remember being on call every third night in the NICU, and I literally I could hardly remember anything of that time
Right.
other than that I did it. But it was we were kind of walking around, running into the walls. We were so exhausted. I'm sure you had the same experience when you did your internship and residency
Right.
training. So I didn't really realize how much sleep is important, but talk about that because I think that sleep is something, and we now include this question: how are your children sleeping?
Right.
And I think it gives a very good idea, especially when the kids get older in their teenage years. If they're
Mhm.
getting only 6 hours of sleep a night, it's not good. And can you speak to that?
Sure. And of course, remembering back to residency, I remember we used to sort of vie for the corner of a room to stand because that was the place to get the best sleep if we were standing. Um, not good.
Yeah,
And thankfully, residency training has changed a
yeah,
lot. So they've been a little more humane as far as giving people time off to rest
for sure.
and recuperate. But sleep is important, and I think from a doctor standpoint certainly doctors who take care of kids, we're so focused on the first year and the first even months. Oh, did your child sleep through the night? Great, we're
Sure.
done. Sleep is now accomplished. It's check it off until we realize that it's not just an issue of infancy. It's an
Yep.
issue for so many reasons, as for toddlers, for elementary school, teenagers, that it's not only the quantity of sleep, but it's also the quality of sleep,
Yep.
where they're sleeping. Is it okay if they get up in the middle of the night and go to the parents' room every night? There's no right or wrong answer, yes or no. That's not a
Sure.
clear cut. But there's so much more to sleep than just, oh, close the door, we're good. We hope they sleep through the night, and then that's it. So some of it is the quality of sleep, and that's certainly from a pediatric ear, nose, and throat
A big
specialist.
issue. Yeah.
Snoring, sleep
Yeah.
apnea in kids is
Yep.
not okay. So that's sort of a relatively new area. And then again, as you said, for teens, it's sort of a rite of passage for every teenager to be up past midnight every night and even later, and then quote unquote make it up on the weekends. And we've learned that you can't just make up
Mhm.
sleep once a
Right.
week or twice a week. It doesn't
So
really
true.
work
Yeah.
that way. And we see so many negative effects for growth, development, focus, school issues, sports. And again, this is just for the kids, and let alone how it's impacting adults,
Totally.
focus,
Yeah.
activity, exercise, how we feel.
And also new mommies famously do not get much
Terrible.
sleep. So
Right.
I push, I talk about this all the time, which is
Sure.
why we should really sleep in our kids. Going back a little bit to the ENT aspect of sleeping, I just had a patient in a couple of days yesterday, and the mother was, said my kids up a couple times at night, and they're not doing that well in school, and these kids are sometimes misdiagnosed as having ADHD or
Right.
having learning issues.
Yeah.
When frankly, what they are is they're totally exhausted because they can't sleep because they can't breathe through
Right.
their nose,
Right.
and they have these gigantic adenoids which occlude
Hmm.
the nasal
Right.
passages. And we typically, human beings, we breathe through our nose when we sleep, right?
We should. We
We
should.
should be.
That's what it's there for.
That's right. And so, kind of just kind of, I know this is a little bit of a parenthetical comment, but can you speak to that for
Sure.
the people
Sure.
listening?
So again, sleep is quantity and quality. So a little bit of snore this is what I tell parents in general, a little bit of snoring where there's regular breathing, in and out breathing, but the child is comfortable, not arching, not waking up exhausted.
Yep.
That's okay. Anything more than that, where there's a gasp or a pause or irregular breathing, or the child seems uncomfortable at night, waking up several times, again, waking up in the morning after, say, oh, but they slept 11 hours, but they're exhausted.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a good 11
That's
hours.
right.
And for kids, that's almost half of a 24-hour day. And that is just as important as what's going on when they're awake.
Right.
So it needs to be addressed. It could be big adenoids, could be adenoids and tonsils, could be allergies, lots of different reasons. But it's definitely not something to ignore and just think of it as a phase. Many kids just grow out of it, but a lot of them really need to be looked at a little more
Yeah.
closely.
They grow out of it
Yeah.
because their anatomy gets bigger, and there's a
Right.
natural
But it could be
involution.
years. That could be 4, 5, 6 years of
That's it.
waiting
Yeah.
while they're, sleep deprived. So it
It's
depends.
so true. And
Yeah.
listen, I've had kids who I've sent to you. They've had their adenoids taken out of their tonsils and adenoids, and the parents come back, and say, "Oh my gosh, they're new people.
Yeah.
They're living, a very different life now. They're
Yeah.
happy.
It's
They're
great.
doing well in
It's
school.
great. Yeah.
That is a total success, and
Yes.
that's something that we always like to see. So sleep is important. The other thing you mentioned is something that I'm very keen on, which is exercise.
Mhm.
Speak to that, because I happen to be a big believer in kids, first of all, getting outdoors
Yes.
and getting moving their body,
Right.
and they're young.
Yeah.
What they're young. I mean, when you're older, you can't get a job. You can't go out and run
Right. Right.
at the park every day. But I'm a big park person.
Mhm.
Your thoughts about that? I loved your
Right.
it
It's
was a
really
cute chapter.
Thanks. So it's really important. I think, thankfully, most kids are natural movers. If anything, it's, parents say, I can't keep my kids still. They're running around. They're running around inside. They want to go play outside. So that's good. And they're natural exercisers. They're natural runners. They want to swim. They want to bike. They want to play. They want to climb. But unfortunately, and this is another chapter, because we have so much technology now,
Yep.
that has overtaken the interest in exercise, and kids would rather be on their screens, whether they're inside or outside, and that's a huge detriment to children.
Yep.
As good as screens are for many reasons, and I will say it, there are a lot of good things with screens for
Sure.
kids. But it has taken the place of exercise.
Yep.
And I do talk about it in the book, and I really try to make it that this is a fun thing. This is not something that you should feel like you have to do. Most kids want to do this.
Yep.
And if there's a sport you don't like, there'll be another sport that you do like. And it may not be an obvious one like the traditional soccer and football or tennis. It may be something that, you want to try, that you enjoy. And I really want to instill that find something you love, and it doesn't feel like it's something, oh, I have to do this,
Yeah.
but it's something that you like to do.
I think that as parents, yes, you're absolutely right. And I think that, there are sports like diving. Okay.
Right.
That's kind of a different one, but I have kids, or even
Fencing.
fencing.
Right.
Fencing is actually a very
Right.
aerobic sport
It's great.
too. I mean, we have everything in Los Angeles.
Right.
We have lacrosse, we have hockey, we have everything you could possibly
Right.
imagine. But I do think there's the elements of, in addition to the exercise, obviously, there's that sense of being out of the house, number one.
Right.
And also that the idea of team activities, when
Right.
you're that sense of community that
Mhm.
you by definition have when you're on a team, that's such a valuable thing for
It
kids.
is. It is.
And it's lacking in the urban environment. And certainly, I don't know how you grew up. How did you grow up? Were you an outside kid?
It was New York, so we certainly had our share of winter, but we did a lot
Yeah.
of outdoor winter activities.
Yeah.
I grew up in the suburbs. Picture Los Angeles with snow. Um,
Yeah.
and, we did a lot of sleigh riding, and, we would go and we walked everywhere. uh, it was, I guess we say now there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
That's right.
So if you had, we just would bundle up, and that was just the nature of it.
Yeah.
We've, I see in Los Angeles, oh, yesterday it rained for an hour, and so the city shuts down,
I
and
know.
that's just sort of because we're not used to that.
Yeah.
But growing up in the Northeast, we ice skating, all those kind of winter sports were just part of what we did. It didn't seem like you can only do things when the sun is shining.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree. And by the way, you can even play in the rain. Did you know that?
I did.
I
I
grew
did.
up I grew up in the rain,
Same.
and we would go outside
Right.
and
No big deal.
play in the
Right.
rain. Yeah, no, it was and that is something very funny. Yesterday, for instance, it did rain yesterday in Los Angeles,
Yes.
and my office went dead quiet. It was like we're all the patients
Right.
that were canceling
Mhm.
because no one can drive in the rain either. In
No.
addition,
No.
so it's very funny. It's kind of a standard LA joke here. But anyway, I love the idea that, you encourage exercise. So important. Listen, parents out there who have kids, our job as parents is to manage and kind of get our kids moving in the right direction. Obviously, we need to look for their propensities and things that they like. And that's what you're talking about. Every sport is not for every kid,
Right.
but usually you can find some kind of activity that aerobic activity that your kids will like to do.
Yes.
If you kind of look with an open mind. You also have a chapter in here about, and this is another very important thing to me, and you alluded to it just now about screen time.
Yes.
Your comments and talk a little bit about your chapter on this.
So screens, I start out by saying, and again, this is for younger kids. It's not really geared towards older
Sure.
teenagers. Um, like it or not, most kids have screens now.
Yeah.
A lot of schools require that they have some form of technology for school in the classroom, starting as early as kindergarten. And that's the reality. And there is a lot of good to that because there are a lot of good programs, a lot of interesting ways of learning. It expands the scope for many kids. So that's been great.
Oh,
And there's a lot of entertainment on screens that's great as well. So I'll just say that. And I say that to the kids that this
yeah.
is not a chapter about saying you shouldn't have a screen or you should never use it. But I talk to them about what a screen does to you. And I give them some scenarios of, even things to try, like go to a restaurant and use your screen. Stay on your screen for 10 or 15 minutes. Turn it off and tell us what happened in the restaurant in that 10 or 15 minutes. And then try looking around without your screen and see. And then most kids will say, well, it was more fun on my screen. The restaurant was pretty boring. Well, yes, but the world is not a screen. The world is not a movie. The world is not a TikTok video. The world is the world. And there's so much that they're missing
Yeah.
when they're not in the world. So I try to show that to them.
Yeah.
And just to understand how they feel, I try to get them to sort of get that feeling when a parent or a teacher or a caregiver says, turn off your screen, and how they react to that, how they feel, how they can take control. I think a lot of the book, I try to get the kids to be part of
Right. You engage. You're
to
engaging the
really
kids. Yeah, I
like
see that. Yeah.
monitor yourself and see how you feel and see what you can do and make
Yep.
some of the decisions yourself as opposed to just being told what to do.
Yep.
And I think, hopefully they'll get a better understanding about that.
Yeah, I think that more and more people are becoming more aware of
Yeah.
screens. And I think the pandemic, of course, kind of put us behind in that
Yes.
category because the kids were zooming to school and what have you, and that kind of bled into much more screen time for everybody, really,
Right.
adults as well. And my hope is that as people see, obviously the levels of anxiety and all these different things have kind of blossomed out of that period. I
Mhm.
really, and we see that in our teenagers. And older people too. But I do think that there's a place for screens. There's no question about it. You're going to live on a screen one way or the other.
Right.
As we age, we certainly do. But I think that these beautiful years of young years, when you're kids, when you're in elementary,
Mhm.
junior high, high school, you kind of lose a little bit. I think you're getting we're not seeing kids engaging as much
Right.
as
Right.
as they should be. Um, this is a beautiful book, friends. I have to say you did a great job, and
Thank you.
I'm going to be buying copies for my and definitely recommending this on a
Thank you.
routine basis in my
Thank you.
practice. Um, the book again is The Ultimate Kids Guide to Being Super Healthy by Dr. Nina Shapiro. She also wrote a book called Hype. By the way, just as we finish off here, any more hype comments? You wrote this book. Nina wrote a book about 5 or 6 years ago called Hype. It was about all the craziness that is out there in terms of the faux treatments and different things. Any other recent things that you've noticed on that horizon?
Oh boy, there's so much. I mean, that's the nice thing about misinformation.
It's never ending.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I think that there's a lot of wellness stuff, which I think is really wonderful to have wellness as part of our world and to
Sure.
explore that. I think, and again, hype, it's really about exaggeration. It's not
Yeah.
about that things are right or wrong. It's just that things are exaggerated. And, there's always that, the wonder pills we know about and the wonder drugs and the wonder creams. Unfortunately, there's no such thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe one day.
Well, maybe one day. And I also think that reliance on the pill or whatever is always kind of a cheap way out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always quite work.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce the name. What is it?
Ozempic?
Ozempic.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that a hype? Is that going to fall into your next book on hype?
I don't know. It's a really interesting drug, and I
Yeah.
think it's the issue is we're starting to learn more and more about it as it's being used more and more frequently for more and
Yeah.
more types of populations. For instance, when it first came out, people were having major anesthesia complications
Wow.
from Ozempic because it slows your digestion. And so the anesthesia societies had to figure out what to tell patients on Ozempic as far as how much time they need to stop it before a general anesthetic
Interesting.
without having what's called aspiration pneumonia
Sure.
because their stomach was still filled from several days before the surgery. So things like that, we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
And, I think that's going to continue for a while until it settles out.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting. I just saw in the news a day or so that they're making pirated Ozempic, and it's not real Ozempic, but
Oh.
people are like scarfing it. They're kind of going there. It's on the black market, and people are getting burned. So be careful where you buy your
Careful.
Ozempic. Okay,
May make you gain weight.
yeah, exactly. You never know what's going to happen.
Right.
Don't know what's going to be in it. So make sure it's a legitimate Ozempic.
Right.
Okay, well, listen. Thank you, Nina, for coming into the studio today. You're a wonderful guest.
Great to be here.
You have done a great job with this book. And friends, again, there's the book right there for those watching on my YouTube channel, The Ultimate Kids Guide to Being Super Healthy, What You Need to Know About Nutrition, Exercise, Sleep, Hygiene, Stress, Screen Time, and more. And by the way, it's written for kids, but adults, you can learn a lot too. I can tell you that I've learned a couple things by reading this book. So, Nina Shapiro, good job. How can people find you?
They can find me at still my website, drninashapiro.com. They can find me on, social media,
You're there.
Instagram at Dr. Nina Shapiro, and the new one formerly known as Twitter, I am still on at Dr. Nina Shapiro, or at the Westside Head and Neck website.
Beautiful. She's out there, friends, I promise you. So, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure having Nina Shapiro. Nina, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank
Until
you.
next time, be well.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.